Hi everyone, welcome to another Hatton's Model Railways live stream, and today we're having a bit of a beginner's look at turntables, both the history behind them, how to use them on your layout, and of course which models are available right now, covering all the different scales through N, HO, OO, and quite a few narrow gauge options there too. I'll be showing you some of the models that we have available today. I'll be showing you some of the finer details behind them too, but if you have got any questions at all, please feel free to add them in our chat, or if you're watching the video a little later on, feel free to comment underneath the video and we'll answer as many questions as we can there too. Otherwise, we'll get started and we'll start looking at these particular bits of railway infrastructure. If you're new to railways or you really like the modern scene, a turntable might be something that's a little bit more unusual to you. But as part of the steam scene, certainly from the mid-19th century onwards, they were an essential part of the railway scene. As you can see here, we've got a huge turntable outside our locomotive sheds in Derby, and one of the main reasons for these to be developed and constructed was for turning locomotives. It sounds quite obvious when you think about it, but there was quite a few different reasons for this to happen. The first being that a lot of locomotives, as we see here, were designed mainly to be driven forward, so chimney first rather than tender first, as it is known. Although the locomotives are set up to be able to pull trains backwards and forwards, it was often better to run forwards with better visibility on the trains and locomotives being permitted to run at higher speeds, chimney first and tender first. So arriving at the end of a line, certainly an express terminus station in one of our major cities, would require the locomotive to be turned, and a turntable would be present at one of those stations. Often you'd find a locomotive would be removed from its train, turned, and also fueled at the same time. So you would have a small or medium-sized fueling depot outside a lot of stations, incorporating a turntable to really get these locomotives turned and ready to go out on their next trains. So we've got some great options there already. These came in around the 1840s, 1850s. There were some transfer tracks and other duties at this time, and turntables got larger and larger to accommodate the larger and larger locomotives that they saw too. So a great example of this is at Nine Elms Depot in London. You can see here just how they've squeezed this into the busy city environment behind, but they have still managed to get a turntable in this area to handle some of the largest southern region locomotives, including the Merchant Navy Pacific that we see here on our screen. So you can see a little bit of the mechanism of how the turntable works here too. It's on a central pivot, which is then turned, usually by hand power. And you can see two wheels on this side of the turntable at both ends, and there's a separate set on the opposite side of the turntable too. This would just help move the turntable round and give real efficiency in that being able to be pushed by one or two people. If we head over to our Pico turntable, a little bit of a preview of the model here, but you'll see the rail and the wheel set up inside our Pico turntable that we see there. So the wheels would roll round on the rail, the turntable would be stopped and started wherever the tracks were set up to come off the turntable. So as you can see, this really was technology that was brought in during the 19th century, but it did stay on right through to the diesel era too. There was less and less turntables after the withdrawal of steam, as many diesel locomotives were built with double-ended cabs, so you could operate them just as efficiently from either end. But the turntables still had a lot of use out there too on the UK's railway network. As we can see here at Old Oak Common Depot, this is a former steam shed, but it was very tight for space here, a depot really in the centre of London almost. So this turntable actually provided access to a lot of different stabling roads for these different diesel locomotives in the 1970s and 1980s. So this was a very efficient use of space rather than having a set of points or different sidings coming off. This turntable allowed for 10 or 12 different roads for diesel locomotives to be stabled on, as we can see here on the screen. So it's a great opportunity to use the smallest space you have to be able to fit in the maximum number of sidings possible. This particular turntable, I believe, operated into the 1980s, showing that it wasn't just for turning locomotives, but also really making the most of the space available there too. You did have turntables at a lot of the major depots, mainly carrying on from the days of steam, but being incorporated for modern uses too. Heading over to one that still survives with us today. This is the turntable at Barrow Hill Roundhouse near Sheffield. And this is a turntable that's actually inside a locomotive shed. So the roundhouse that we see here is, although it's a square building, it's got a round circle of tracks coming off the turntable again for locomotive stabling, really making use of that space that we have there inside the shed building. So the turntable will be mounted centrally within the building, and we can see underneath that Class 03 shunter, we can see the mechanism of the turntable with the wheels and the single rail, allowing that to be turned once again. You'll often find that a lot of the turntables have locking mechanisms too, so they will lock into place when they are lined up with the tracks coming off the turntables, and a lot of these are replicated in model form too. So you've got some great opportunities here to get turntables onto your layout, but everything we've seen so far is very urban or very large. We've seen some great examples at Derby, as we see here, with 4 LMS or ex-LMS locomotives outside a huge shed. But don't be fooled into thinking that you need a huge layout to be able to fit a turntable on. Some of them were located in very rural locations indeed, mainly to allow for the different types of traffic that ran out there. This particular example, I believe, is at Buxton in the Peak District, and this purely was a facility to turn the locomotives that we see here. So this locomotive's come in on a special working and is being turned, so it's ready to work back on its duty back out of the Peak District from whence it came. There's quite a few, as some of you are mentioning there in the chat too, still around in preservation, and they have been incorporated into preserved railways for exactly the same purposes that we have discussed, for preferential driving of locomotives running chimney first. And one thing to bear in mind too is if you have a railway with a lot of curves facing one particular way, say you've got a lot of left-hand curves rather than right-hand curves, you will find that the axles on one side of your wheels, on one side of your locomotive or coach, will wear down a lot quicker than they will on the other side due to the tightness of the curve. And if your curves are unbalanced, you've got more curves heading one way, you'll find that has an uneven wear on your axles. Now, you can balance that out by turning your locomotives and rolling stock so the other side wears down after a while. So a lot of preserved railways and indeed mainline operators still have turntables for that use out there too. One thing we've not covered is some of the smallest turntables you can get out there. And these are wagon turntables. These really do go back right to the start of the days of steam, back in the 1830s and 1840s. Very rarely seen today because there's not so many small wagons about on the network. But as you can see here from this 1940s themed layout, you've got a very efficient shunting operation going on here. I'm not sure what health and safety would think of it today, but the locomotive there hauling the wagon from between the buildings with the chain, and then it will be turned on that very small turntable in front of it. This really does make use of every single nook and cranny on some of the layouts and in spaces, especially in industrial sites. During the later 19th and early 20th centuries, these very small wagon turntables would be seen absolutely everywhere to be able to allow wagons to enter the buildings or to enter some of the tight gaps between buildings that you see here on the screen too. Another example of those comes down to narrow gauge, where we've got an even smaller turntable, again for wagons, but this really is only a couple of feet long and even smaller in model form too. We have those available in 009 gauge and 016.5 gauge for you 7mm narrow gauge modelers too. So let's have a look at some of the models that we have available. As you can see in front of me, we've got models that cover 00 gauge, and we've got models that cover N gauge too, and some narrow gauge examples that you can pick up today. The one a lot of you are no doubt most familiar with is the Hornby turntable, the R070, which is available to order from us right now, should you wish to pick one up. This is electrically operated. You get the switches to come with this that operates the turntable. It has set places along the sides where the turntable will stop, and then your locomotive can be driven onto the turntable. Your railway controller, or a separate controller if you wish, can then be used to turn the turntable to the point where you want the locomotive to come off. With each turntable, you do get a set of specific tracks to clip to the turntable that do come off. You can buy more of these from the Hornby Spares department on the Hornby website too. You get around 4 or 5 in the pack, as well as all the details that you see here, but you can pick up more of these for the additional tracks there if you want to. This is a great way to get started with turntables. There's some points that you may want to look at, but some really good points to it too. First of all, the turntable pit in front of our locomotive here is quite low. So this turntable will sit on top of your baseboard. You don't need to do any chopping or any removal of wood to be able to put this turntable in there too. Some of the limitations are that it does only have the set track pieces, so you will need to incorporate that into your layout, although you do have quite a number of options on the side of the turntable there too. You can DCC it. You do require a locomotive decoder to operate it on digital, and you can hardwire a decoder onto this, and there is a guide on the Hornby website. It's not quite as detailed as some of the other turntables either, but if you are wanting an electrically operated turntable for your locomotives and you don't want to go through the trouble of cutting out any of your baseboard, this really is the way to go to pick up one of these and install it very easily on your layout indeed. So do take a little bit of a look at the details there, and we've got that available right now. If you are fancying a little bit more work, maybe a Christmas or New Year project, have a look at the extensive range of other turntables that we have available right now. These include the Pico turntables, which we have in a variety of different scales. These come in different scales and sizes too. We have the 00 or HO model here. Going even further than that, we have narrow gauge turntables of a very similar design in a lot of different track styles there too, covering HOM, 009, N-gauge, and more. So we've got the full range available now on our website if you want to look at any of those particular turntables. And of course, click the link in the description for more information. These turntables come with the pit pre-built, and then you need to do a little bit of work just to install the various parts and the rails inside the pit too. But it's not too much work, especially if you're a beginner to building plastic kits, or if you want to build a more detailed turntable that we see here. They're also great for modifying with many different styles, and you can change the inside from the pre-supplied concrete to some of the brick style turntables that are seen on earlier builds, as we saw, I believe it was at Derby. I'll just check on the picture there. You can see some of the brick and stone rendering on the side of this particular turntable. So when we come to these turntables, other than the Hornby models, you do need to start chopping away at your board to be able to fit the well of the turntable into your layout. This will require some wood tools such as a saw or a circular saw if you have one, or something along those lines. That's obviously something to have a look at, but at the same time, they do come with templates in there. You get a paper template with the diameter needed to fit the turntable in, so you're not having guesswork. You don't need to make up any dimensions or drawings. You can just fit those in straight from the bat. These turntables are supplied without any controls at all, so you can choose to hand operate them if you wish. And of course, you can have the tracks coming off any single place you want. Pico have brought out a turntable control motor, which you can set up. This is powered by analog, so it's fully separate from any system that will be installed on your model railway already. And you can pre-program these to stop at any of the points where you install your own tracks coming off the system. So you're not set as you are with the Hornby turntable as to the exact positions of where your track comes off. You can program the turntable motor from Pico to do that too. If you're looking at more of a budget option, you can pick up the Expo turntable motorizing kit. Now, this won't have the preset positions for coming off your turntable. It's purely a motor to turn the turntable as you provide power to it. So it's a little less precise, but it's also at a cheaper price. So it is a great option. If you are on a budget, you can combine this with one of the Pico turntable kits and get that installed on your layout too. If we're looking at full control, if we're looking at something a little bit more playable, we can have a look at the Helgen turntable. This is great for modelers of HO and 00 scale models. Everything you see on the left of our turntable there comes pre-fitted, so there's no extra parts you need to fit, apart from the tracks you are installing coming off the turntable there. And as you can see on the bottom right, we have our full control system that we have there. Again, you can fully preset this to set your tracks up with any destinations that you have. And you can set up tracks exactly as they would appear in real life too. So it's a fully separate control for analog there that you can see, and you can incorporate this turntable into your digital layout too. It's a fully detailed model with the turntable well already pre-made installed. All you need to do is cut the hole in your layout with the pre-supplied template and then install the tracks, set up your turntable and go. It is one of the easiest ones to incorporate into your layout. And of course, it's available from us right now too. If you're having a look on our website, it is in the link in the description. But if you're having a little trouble finding it, it's also Helgen's product code 89121. Heading over to Engage now, we have this big Kato turntable in front of me. This has everything you need to get started. As you can see here, this is a fully complete kit. You've already got your pre-made turntable there with 6 tracks already installed, but you can see from the kit that there's an option to add many, many more should you wish to. You've got an electric turntable controller up there in the top left, very similar to Kato's controllers that are available for the models that come out too. You've got all your switches, all your polarity switches in there, all your electrical controls. This contains every single thing you need to get started with an Engage turntable. And again, we have these available right now. They do come in at a higher price point. They come in at £310. But they include every single thing you need for that price. There's very little work you need to do other than installing this and a couple of minutes programming it to set and stop at the particular tracks that you wish. This, okay, it is a slightly higher price, but it's one of the easiest we have here to install, and it's a fantastic option for Engage modelers who do want a bit of control over what turntable options they have. Of course, for you Engage modelers, we have Engage versions of the Pico turntables available right now, which are motorized in exactly the same ways with either the turntable motor or the Expo motorizing kit that we saw a couple of minutes ago. For Narrowgauge modelers, we do have models that you can just about see here of our wagon turntables, and these are available for 00 and O gauge modelers too. Of course, you can use the narrow gauge version for an N-gauge model should you wish. And vice versa, you can use some of the N-gauge turntables for your 009 layout if you wish to use those there too. So some of the turntables do have slightly different sizes of the wells, so they will be different sizes. All the measurements and dimensions are available on our website, so you're able, before you buy a turntable, to make sure that all of your locomotives, such as our Star class here, will fit on a turntable on your layout. Of course, you can measure the locomotives, or we have the dimensions for those too on our website. So you can certainly check out all the details of these and some guides on how to build, construct and set them up too if you head over to our website at hattons.co.uk. But I've always been a fan of turntables. I've always tried to incorporate one in pretty much every layout I've made, whether it's an old-fashioned steam railway or whether it is a modern image depot out there too. There's some fantastic options for modelers, not only from the really busy urban terminuses, such as we see here at 9 Elms Depot, really squeezing that in there to have a locomotive facility in the centre of London, heading through to the more rural setups that we saw there in the heart of the Peak District, used for turning our locomotives and preparing them for their return journeys out of the Peak District to destinations beyond. But not forgetting also that these turntables had other uses in the modern periods, with locomotive stabling in the 1970s and still in use at some sites up to the current date too. So if you are a modeller of the British Railways from pretty much their start right up to the current day, you've got some great options to add turntables for your layout, whether you are using them to make locomotive operation more efficient, or you just haven't got quite the space for a huge shed, but you really want a roundhouse and you still want to have lots of locomotives stabled on your layout too. Every single item I've shown you here today, including the tools, the kits and the locomotives, are available to order right now from hattons.co.uk. All the information on pricing, installation, the sizes of these particular models and how to set them up too is all located on that link in the description. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you do have any further questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch either with our customer experience team via phone, email or live chat, or if you want to pop a question underneath the video, either on Facebook or YouTube, we'll be more than happy to answer your questions there too. Otherwise, thanks again for watching and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.